But it really hit me in talking to Christy even this week about a listing that she was shepherding that, a seller was particularly pushing, or us who are really good at this job, we just want to make people happy, right? And part of making people happy is sometimes we feel like we have to tell them what they want to hear or do more what they want to do than what we really know is right for them to do, and having the right way of saying what they need to do and then believing it and following your lead versus just letting them lead becomes this interesting push and pull and dance. But she and I were talking, and that's what kind of inspired me to say, I almost didn't do this because I thought, gosh, such a busy time of year. I mean, maybe we should just skip one right now, but it just seemed timing was right. That we were talking about a townhome that we just did a little fix-ups and a little paint and carpet on over here around the corner in New Parish. And maybe the last one, as I recall, most similar was maybe 300. It been up to 310. And the seller just was real firm and real tight, single woman on buying and selling at the same time, and a lot of expenses, and holding both properties and getting anxious. She just really wanted 305 really bad. And so the question was, well, do we just price it at 305 and hope we get 305, because that'll really make her happy to feel like we were at 305. And my counter to that was, when our original discussion was, let's price it where the other one priced it to bid up, which was $299 or $300, because that's such a huge price break, right? Like $100,000 search criteria. Even 301 was going to probably eliminate a zillion buyers from even seeing it if they have all their little presets on a bunch of their searches online, from it coming up necessarily for them to even see. So the discussion was, it's much better, even though they don't believe it sometimes, it's much better for them to price it a little lower or be at a break point like that. Like if you said to me, should I price a house at $389 or $399? I don't think it's going to make that whopping of a difference unless there's a lot of competition right then at that line around $399 and you want to kind of undercut the competition a little. But when you're saying, should I be at 305 or 310 versus 299, 300, it's just such a huge lever of a differential, and trying to get the seller to hear us and understand us that it's really for their best interest. And it really kind of resonated with me. I didn't make this example, but I think I'm going to start making it. There's several different examples I use. I will tell you mine, and then I want to hear from Renee or anybody else what they think their examples have been. But I think if you think about the end game on The Price is Right, it really hit me, as I said, is the price right and the price is right type of thing, that you lose if you win over, right? You can always win if you stay under the number that's the right number, but you always lose if you go over. And that is a true analogy. The seller that goes a little too high, even for a week or two, because what I explained to them is, and their theory is, who hasn't heard, well, I can always go high and come down. I'm not in a hurry. These are always the objections or the justifications. Or I have a little nicer kitchen than my neighbor did. Just all these reasons and rationales. And again, those reasons and rationales might make sense, some of them, but not when you're talking about such a big price break in a price search criteria. So really kind of focusing on, don't go over a line, stay under it, even a little bit maybe conservative under it, because that's when people come in and generally compete, because it's such a good deal. I had some people this past couple weeks, they saw a listing of mine. It's a higher end listing, it's 155. It bid up, they didn't go for it. They kept hemming and hawing, it's great, it's the one we probably want, but we haven't looked in the market in a while, really have a house to sell. Like, they just knew they liked it, but they weren't quite ready. So I knew it was probably gonna pass them by. Well, that one bid up to a little over 1.6. Well, this weekend, a friend of mine that in the neighborhood was listing one. It happened to be, rarely, because they're mostly custom in there, but happened to be a version of that same floor plan. And they went in, it was 1.6, but they hadn't done the touch-up paint. Some of the carpet was frayed by a little kitty cat, and she's allergic to cats, so that doesn't help. But they just felt it wasn't buttoned up. And certainly if mine was 155 and this was 1.6, there's no way it was worth that to them. And again, the reverse psychology to me was, it didn't go for 155, folks. Erase, 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 and you didn't go for it. So anyway, that's the reverse side of the coin that I know it went over that. And we're just talking about a little touch-up paint and a little carpet in this price range. It's going to go. By the end of the day, that house was sold and they didn't go for it. And it's the only one that floor plan that they said they loved and had to have. So sorry to spin off on that, but that's the reverse side of it. It's trying to convince someone what the market is and what the value of a property is. But the real idea of not crossing over has made a big, big difference in me when I price homes and when I tell people why to price them. And if they're no matter what, if I have something I really swear up and down should be $350, I'd say like $450 or $550 or something like that. And they just got to try that, like something in the T said that it might could be 10,000 more. And I'll go, okay, let's just try $459.9, but let's not go more than 2 weekends, and a cumulative about 10, 11 days, right? Because I usually kick mine off on a weekend. Because if it's dead the first weekend to the first few days, and you may get hardly any showings or no showings, you better pull a trigger fast. What I would try to explain to a seller is, if we don't do it right and we go over and have to come back, even that 10 days or that 2 weeks, and some of them are like, oh, I'm not in a hurry, give it a month. No, it's like grapes just souring on a vine, because once you get them to get to the right price, now the buyer sees it at that price, but guess what else they see? The days on the market. And even though you just changed it, psychologically, you might as a listing agent be able to get a buyer in right away at that who had been on the fence, and that's perfect, and they might go ahead and give you the asking price. But more often than not, the guys who are shopping around, who are just coming in the market and seeing it, see it and go, well, why hasn't it sold in a couple weeks? Certainly it's more negotiable now. So that's why I tell them, I'm like, you could easily now lose 10 more thousand. So instead of trying to price 10,000 up and then come down and then have to give away 10, let's just price it right. Hope we get it or get over. That's a much better gamble and a much less of a gamble. And I'm trying to go in with confidence and information of what's worked and why it's worked, and consistently telling them that. Other good examples I give people is I tell them, you need to think of yourself in a grocery store checkout line. And when I look at what's active, a lot of times I don't price a house the day I see it. I go back and send them pricing. I'm very, very conservative about discussing price at the first listing appointment. I want them confident in me and what I do, even though it's a lot of extra work sometimes, because then too they feel like maybe I haven't just judged the house. Now it could bite me that someone else walks in and super confident, and some of these real I personalities just go in, if you guys know this, and just say, oh yeah, we can get that, and tell them everything they want to hear, and they get the listing and I don't. And sometimes that happens. That's my risk, is they seem to know it better than you do it because they just throw it out there. Well, no, they just threw something out there to make you happy to get the listing, right? But so we've got to kind of, if we know we're in competition, kind of lay some groundwork to say, I'm the type of person, before I make any prejudgments about your house, before I come in, I want to see what you've done since it last sold. I want to see if the basement was finished at this point, because maybe it was unfinished last time. I want to see, how your yard, how your, everything about it. Even if I sold it to them 5 years ago, I want to see everything about it this time. Occasionally, if it's so cookie cutter and I'm super confident I just sold 4 in that neighborhood in the last couple months, I might walk in and say pretty quickly, it's this little range right here that I think you'll be in. And I'm strategically setting a range that the number I know is at a break point that I want to be at. And I know I'm going to have that conversation later that they're going to take the high end of that range. And I'm going to have a quick conversation about why we don't want to go quite to that line. But if they land at it, I know how to strategically only let them do 2 weekends before I pull it in also. Because sometimes we do win at $459.9 and get something. And I'm big about explaining these price buckets, these search buckets. Like every 25, 50, 100 thousands are search buckets. So sometimes it doesn't make any difference that if you're going a little over, you're seen in a bucket. Let's just say somebody puts it at 5099. You're seen in a bucket that goes up to 550 most of the time. Do you not think the houses that are really 550, or if they're in their budget, are going to be much more appealing to them? And those are the ones probably they're going to buy. Most people don't buy under their range, right? They would buy 2 or maybe even a smidge over their range sometimes by bidding up or competing. But that's kind of another little psychological thing I get into people, is that you want to be the best in your bucket. So So the best of your bucket too is being the front of the grocery store line. We want to check out. We want to check out quickly. We don't want people in the actives when I go back and also tell them the day we're going to go active or the day before, where I'm looking at new pricing and where the prices have gone, what's recently sold, and what our competition is. Sometimes it might mean I justify going up a little bit. I can tell y'all, 80% of the time that I get all excited that everything's gone well and now I'm going to tell them more, I kick my own butt later because sometimes those don't go well and now I've seized them on. And I already have them sold on the lower price. I don't know why I do these things to myself. You know, you just get excited about it. So just keep reminding yourself, lower is better. A little lower is better because the market will always speak and it will create a yield of what it's worth. Even in much slower markets, I remember being really upset in a neighborhood that I did a lot in, that someone listed one right before I listed one, and I didn't know it was coming that was very, very similar. And I was so pissed because I priced it so low that it was going to screw me up on what I had told the seller theirs was worth. Well, lo and behold, even back then when we didn't have multiple offers, I found out through the grapevine it got multiple offers. It bid up exactly to what I was going to list the other one for. So the market speaks, the market yields, the market kind of does. As long as there's buyers in it, it's going to push it to what it's worth. And then in some overheated markets we've had, it's going to push it beyond what it's generally worth or what we generally will see, because guess what? Somebody's sister's 2 doors down. And it's worth more to them to live 2 doors down from their sister than anybody else. And that just might happen. And that's when I say we're on our buy side. We say this is most likely what's going to happen. However, there's that wild card, right? That something just fits so much, someone's willing to just write the check. And then I tell them too, because when they're on the market, if they don't stay that first 1, 2, or 3 about to check out, and more people break in front of them. So I'm always looking, at least by every week. Usually after that first weekend, if it's not sold, within 2 or 3 days, I'm giving a little mini market update, a little touch base. Did I see anything that we were competing with sell? If not, maybe we're all okay. There just weren't buyers biting that weekend. But did I see 4 of them drop their price and now we're behind? We don't want to be behind. We want to stay in the front of the line. Otherwise our days on the market keep going and going, and the market keeps adjusting around us while we bury our head in the sand instead of leading the market. And they also need to know, as long as they're leading the market, they're creating competition, or sometimes the first weekend could be a bluff that other offers are coming in, but you still write a really strong price and you get it. That's another reason as a seller, is that you could get the control more of what those terms are. You're going to get better terms. When you've waited 2 weeks, 4 weeks, you got one offer. Not only did you lose some negotiation power, and they're going to want money off every time, but you might also end up with, I just saw something come in, $500 due diligence, right? I mean, you see that on a $450 house. Now that we've been in the market we've been in for so long, that feels like, oh, that's nothing. Like they can just decide tomorrow that was a bad idea and walk away, right? We want a little bit more skin in the game. So trying to get a seller to understand that their power play switched to of what the terms, because there's more than just a price. Because the price doesn't matter if it doesn't close. It's all the rest of the terms that come through. I know I've been to some coaching and things in the past that made some great analogies of, they call it fishing. So sometimes if you have men who are good fishing things, it's always like pick your audience a little bit, right? Some might be Price is Right and talk through that. But they would do things like you've got a little pond and the fish are in the pond and they're kind of said that they're, you know, fishing pole, if you will. And this is kind of price, right? That wherever the fish were, meaning the buyers, were biting off their little hook, might be here's the price. But guess what? We were here for a while and they all ignored us. They weren't biting. So our bait's wrong. And so then it's like, yep, we need to go down to that next block and get the next pool of fish. Because this pool of fish may not be as discerning as this because there's not as much competition, or it's nicer for the price range that they're looking at, and now it stands out in the crowd. Because I always tell you, and you guys have seen it, we'll see a house that is sit on a market for 75, 80 days. Your buyer likes it that weekend, and damn if another offer doesn't come in. Well, guess what? It's because it became either the front of the grocery store line is my analogy, like everybody else, either attrition or they changed their price and got in the front of the line, or they lowered the price to be in the front of the line, and it's just a standout for what it is. And as soon as it's a standout for what it is to your buyer, if someone else is shopping in that genre, it's a standout to them too. So we've always got to have that kind of language on both sides of the fence. I always think a good realtor knows both sides, right? You can look at it from the buyer's eyes and the seller's eyes. We had a seller, Nicole's dealing with, she loves this property. It's the third time she's sold it. It's always a pain to her because every seller doesn't want to do any work on it and sell it as is, and it needs work, right? Well, one client comes along and accepts it. Well, now he's selling it a year later, and plain as day in a inspection report, a bunch of stuff potentially wrong under your crawl space. You need a structural engineer. But he doesn't want a structural engineer. He said, what if he comes over and says, I need to do $50,000 worth of work? I said, well, that's exactly if you put your buyer hat on, and I know you were a buyer and you knew it was 1965 and it was a low price when you bought it and you were fine with it. But the average consumer, we've raised the price in 1 year, a chunk, and you've done a little, but not that much. And the only way to justify is it needs to be buttoned up. So getting him to see that the buyer's risk walking in is an eliminator. Like, I don't know if you guys know that many buyers who are gonna go, okay, pretty much premium price, and here's an inspection report talking about all kinds of other nicky-nacky stuff that wears them down, but plus, an engineer needs to look at all this crazy stuff under this crawl space. He's like, well, I don't wanna know. That's not gonna solve any problems here. We gotta know, because the way we solve problems is to remove the doubt, to remove the unknowns, right, from the equation.
On that, his structural was done this morning. It's really not that bad.
Yeah.
Some things, but it's really not that bad.
That's awesome, and that's what we thought. That's what I told him. A lot of them are averagely $2,000 to $5,000 in work. Don't get me wrong. You can call some of these crawl space guys who go out and want $40,000 for nothing. I've seen it. But our guys are reasonable. We get the list and we do it, or at least have a quote so someone can digest it. But you guys all know, just get it done. Because then if you say engineer, even if I know what can be done and how much it costs, buyers still shut down because their pop friends and co-workers and daddies and everybody think, are you crazy? That's how it says structural problems. The word structural drives people bananas. And it's usually just a little bit of bricks and sticks, as they call it. Just real simple, cheap stuff. Were you gonna ask them?
No, I was sorry. I was gonna say that I just had one like that. The lender wanted the structural letter. The seller would not give it. He just refused to get it. So I just told the buyer side, I said, well, the lender asked for it, but he didn't say who should get the structural letter. So you guys can go ahead and get the structural letter, which they did. And as it turned out, they didn't have any problems
Right.
with it. So, but I think the seller was kind of afraid that, just like you said, that there might be things that they would want him to fix and he just wasn't having it. So.
Yep. And technically, although sometimes our inspectors invite a lot of stuff on an inspection, that might lead to more things. So your buyer thinks, I don't want to get any more invested. I'm going to shift some of this to the seller. And they might be able to in the pushes and pulls, but technically all inspections are bore by the buyer, right? So.
Yeah, but isn't the inspection supposed to identify if a house has structural? I mean, okay,
Potentially structural problems.
potentially structural.
Right. That's why I tell people, think of it as a general practitioner looking through everything, and then they called out for a specialist. Hey, you probably want an HVAC guy. Something wasn't quite right here. We don't open them up and run every system like an HVAC guy. Hey, there's an electrical thing here. We don't know what it is. You might need an electrician to check this out. So it's still the buyer's responsibility to go to the specialist. It's not, doesn't shift over to the seller in our contracts. Sometimes you can get them to, because you're like, my people are tapped out. They're not going to pay the $600 for the engineer, and it's going to cost you your closing, right? But in all these kind of thought processes of trying to coach sellers into pricing right and not overpricing, I don't know, you've got any more like analogies or things you tend to say to people?
I mean, I think, the advantage of like TAR reports, right? I think depending on type of client, which we have pretty similar clientele, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's the engineers, CPAs, white collar professionals. A lot of times, if you can put data in front of them too, like I think stories are great depending on the personality, but if you can then put some data in front of them, and there's a lot of data, for instance, in TAR reports that show like original pricing, price reductions, and then the list to sell price ratio. And sometimes I find that is good leverage to be able to show them like, hey, pricing right, they're at 98%. When we have to do a reduction, all of a sudden we're at 95%. So I think guiding that, I also always set the precedent. Literally, like I'm like you too. I do a 2-stage listing appointment. I know a lot of people will argue that's not the best way to do that. Unless again it's a cookie cutter type thing. But I like to kind of approach it the same way. I need to get a sense and feel for that house, right? Like I can't tell if something's super quirky in photos that might be a floor plan challenge or something like that. So I always do that in a 2-step approach too, unless, like I said, it's just a basic kind of cookie cutter type thing. As far as analogies, I tend to probably work in more stories, right? And I have a great example of someone that wanted to price higher, did not listen. It was a good friend of mine. And they actually even put this in writing, which was even better. And basically, when after a couple weekends they finally moved to the price that I had suggested and it sold, but it sold for less because we had been on the market 14 days, right? So I think the storytelling type thing is always super helpful. I also tell people we have to sign a listing agreement with a number in it, right? And I'm normally giving a range, and then a lot of times we have longer lead time on our listings, so we might have 4 or 6 weeks and something could change. And so we're always checking again before we make any permanent history, of it. So we're setting that range so they know, hey, this could go up a little bit, it could go down a little bit, depending on what we're seeing in the active market. And kind of same thing, I have moved away from pricing at like $4.99 or $5.99. I always price on
The 100.
the 100. I know there's some different theories on that, and I think that thought process has also changed across the last 20 years because so much of the buyer search online is drop-down menus. So sometimes I'll explain that to a client too, like, hey, let's just do a search and see what happens when we change it, how a buyer would search, right? So that's another thing that I probably use a lot. I also tell people, I guess an analogy I use a lot is think of a model home, right, being a 10, and ask them, like, score your house. And a lot of them will be like, oh gosh, like compared to a model home, I'm probably like a 5. So you're already kind of getting them in that thought process that, hey, if you're going to be competing with model homes, especially like in some of our outerlying areas where we have a lot of, resales with new construction, it automatically kind of gets that doubt in their mind, like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to have to be more competitive on pricing to, make something happen. And I typically tell people our goal, right, when we're listing a home is to get you to like an 8. That's another. So I use
that.
I use numerical things, I think, a lot. And then, like I said, showing them a live search to see what else, to kind of force them to be like, oh,
Be
well,
realistic.
yeah, my house doesn't look as nice as that, or and then that kind of helps you kind of chart the way of like, well, we can get to this if we do, X, Y, and Z. I think, and I'm sure Sharon's similar to that, I don't get a ton of pushback on like, hey, we need to do X, Y, and Z. Because again, they're hiring you as a professional, and I point blank tell people, you're paying me a lot of money for my advice, so you can choose to listen and, shorten your time, and, get the best ROI out of your property, right? So we're not doing like kind of willy-nilly things. We're being pretty clear and concise on, hey, here's what we're going to do. Here's what that cost looks like.
Yeah. And that's why I put a little asterisk that it has to be, it's not
Yeah,
just
for
a price,
the condition
right?
and features.
The
Yeah.
condition and features are a big piece of that. So if someone smoked in a house, that's a huge like lever, and trying to explain to them like how that could severely affect the clientele. And as soon as you limit your buyer pool, you're lowering your price.
Yeah.
And that I always use things like things you can change and can't change. I can't change if your house backs to 540, has a major power line, has a super steep driveway. I'm probably not going to restructure it if you went in and did something that you thought was cool for your family but doesn't really work for most other people. And once you do those things, it's going to lower your price. But my counterbalance to that is a lot of people make a decision about a house about the way it makes them feel when they walk inside, more than the outside. And I've taken on the challenge house that didn't sell with someone else backing to 540. and it still looked like 1980s inside. And then we said, okay, but if we do, if you're willing to invest in these surface things and make it feel really good inside, then we can probably overcome this with the right price. And it sold in like within 2 weeks that next round. And they thought we were geniuses, but it's because their other agent either didn't know how to explain, or maybe they were real resistant, and now the second agent gets the advantage of they really want to listen this time.
I had something similar to that happen, a listing that I put on in January. It had been listed with a prior agent for like 5 months. They interviewed, I think, 8 different agents, and I was the only agent they said that actually told them what they needed to do at the listing appointment. So got the listing. I think we did about $10,000 worth of work. We made sure it was professionally staged because it was kind of a funky floor plan, and we got multiple offers on it in the first weekend, and they thought I was the best thing since sliced bread. I mean, but they listened. They ended up getting more money too.
Right.
Even though they did have to invest $10,000, we knew to be competitive in that space what we needed to do. And so, I think always being able to cement yourself as an authority, right? Like they trusted.
Confidence.
Yes, they trusted. My advice. Felt like it was maybe a little bit different from others, right? I mean, I think similar to a house, right? When someone's walking into a house, that sense and feel, it's the same thing when you're at a listing appointment, right? In a competitive situation, those people have to sense and feel that they're confident in you and your abilities.
Yeah.
Without being arrogant.
Right. No, they have to
Yeah.
feel that it's a genuine, like, I want the best for you. We are aligned together. We're not aligned to be butting heads about this.
Yes.
Because I think that's the hardship is when you walk in, especially, I don't know, a mature crowd who's put their wallpaper up or still has their,
Has their wood
Baldwin
trim.
brass,
Yeah.
fixture they paid $800 for back in the day, and you want to change it, and they kind of get that as hands on hips, I'm not changing this, and you've got to ask them. And there's an agent that used to work for Linda Craft. She had a little saying. She's like, well, would you rather me hurt your feelings or hurt your pocketbook? And she'd ask them that, right? And that was a good one. I like that little zinger. Because then it was like, hey, we can just tell you everything you want to hear. And I'll even sometimes always say, I do just want to tell you what you want to hear. I want to tell you it's $800,000 like you just thought and Zillow told you, and that you don't have to do a thing, and you're going to get multiple offers this weekend. But I have
That's not
experienced,
reality.
yeah, I have experienced, and let's pull up a couple of these that went $750 to $800. Do you see all these white quartz kitchens and clear glass showers and freestanding tubs, like $30,000 bath renovations, $20,000 to $50,000 kitchen renovations? Like, you see these things. So could you see that the market most likely is not going to yield that with yours when it still has a lot of the original stuff, right?
And I think those situations are hard, right? Because you don't want to hurt someone's feelings, right? Because they're already having a hard time leaving a home that's probably been their home for 30 or 40 years. So it is, but I will say that's where the stager is helpful too, because then you don't become the bad guy.
Right.
Because I felt like a lot of times I had like a dartboard on my back walking out of, listings. So I typically tell people like, hey, my primary focus is to build rapport with you, build trust with you, demonstrate my expertise. It's not to tell you what we need to do or not do with your house right now, right? Because I also got tired of giving free advice.
Exactly. Because I
And
feel
then-
like they take their little notebook and say, okay, let's walk around the house.
Yeah.
And all I'll do is point out a few things. Like, hey, you see that sheetrock piece kind of crumpling up and shearing in the corner? Buyers start thinking, or that you've got a structural problem. We all know it's just some sheetrock tape. They're like, oh yeah, good eye. Things like that. Like little thing. Oh, you see the shower? It's looking like it probably needs some little fresh caulk and a little bit of grout. Like, I'll try to pick a few little things that I think they'll go, oh, that doesn't cost a lot. Oh, I see what she's saying. These are eye catchers that are going to wear down a buyer. But then I explain to them through the process that my stager comes in and spends a long time in here, inside and out, and she's going to write a lot of stuff. It might even get overwhelming, but for us to be able to process all that and then give you the best package that's going to get you the best results, it's kind of like just have to slowly work them into each piece of the process. And then sometimes I've got a couple lately, they want to even do more than, I'm like, stop,
Yeah.
Or you send, back in the day, I used to send them to Lowe's with a actual like number that they could pull off of, and the actual look of the light fixture, and it was like a $30 light fixture, and just get that and bring it back, and these little simple knobs for your kitchen, so we can update those. Those are kind of scuffed and peeling and stuff. And I just need you to buy these few little things, so when my painter gets here, he can just install them real cheap as he goes. And he'd show up and all the wrong stuff would be there. Oh no, I like this $200 light fixture better. Like, no. We're selling this house. All we're trying to do is get the right look and feel to sell it for top dollar and get you the biggest return. So that's where I personally took over, and that's what that last listing, what's it called, white glove listing presentation series just went through, because this girl Brittany Pino does it this way too. You know, I hired a full-time person because I found myself spending half my day with a shopping cart at Home Depot and Lowe's picking up everything, and you know, writing down all the paint colors and everything. So then it got to that point where it just like, okay, we need someone managing this and just doing it for them, because they're living their lives and they're working, they're juggling their kids and going to sports, and they just can't handle it. You know, so I just found that when they're chasing contractors or chasing parts and pieces, I would frustrate them and lose them, or they'd be so burned out by the time you listed it, you know, it was a problem.
And I think it's also assessing their goals. Not everyone wants to get top dollar for their house. Some people are just like, I don't know, I just want this dang thing off my plate. Just tell me the price that I need to put this at to get it off my plate, right? So I think it's also, one thing I always open with people is like, what are your goals that you'd like to accomplish, so that we're on the same page? Because obviously we can design a program that, you know, as long as our goals are reasonable, to, you know, get you to that goal, right? And so I think it's definitely understanding that person's motivation, because you are going to have clients that are like, hey, I'm not going to do anything. Mm-hmm. I just want this off of my plate. And that's okay too. Mm-hmm. I mean, those sell too, right. You know.
No, yeah.
I mean, that happens. So I think definitely assessing that, like their goals, and asking them what their goals are, because then your job is you can then guide them whether the goal is realistic, and hey, we may have to make some adjustments, or you know, hey, we could actually probably accomplish this if you're willing to do X, you know, Y, and Z. So, yeah. I mean, I think it's always just crafting that presentation and your discussion with them around their goals. I think we always forget, like, our goal might be to get the most amount of money, but that's not always our client's goal.
Yeah. Most of them it is, right? Most of them want it is every dollar and then some they can find.
Yeah.
And occasionally I've had the ones that said, look, tell me the price I need to put it at and make it gone this weekend.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, and that doesn't happen a lot, but it does.
Right.
It does.
Someone just gets in critical mass mode, or
they just don't want to deal with it.
There's bigger fish to fry in their financial position of where they're going for a job and dealing with things. But I think if they feel like they're not doing the heavy lifting, and that will be just a question for you guys as you handle listings and what you can do individually, if you're not on a team that handles it for you, is what you can take off their plate. Because that's the other piece that could get you hired, is the person who's moving out of town this weekend and interviewing 3 agents. As soon as you can tell them, no, you know, next week, I promise my painter will be over here, he'll do this, he'll do that, I'll get you a quote, I'll handle it for you, I'll make sure it's done right, I'll make sure before I put the lockbox on there and start showings that it looks really good. Some of them are like super relieved to know that you're gonna assist them. You're not just gonna tell them, call this guy and call that guy and hope it works out, and hope they'll answer their phone.
We actually tell them we would prefer to be the interface with the contractors, because you know, we're used to dealing with them every day, right? Where, because I feel like if you leave it to the seller, it ends up just,
it's a mess.
It's a mess. It ends up derailing it. So
they're frustrated, or contractors frustrated. They all think they painted the wrong color somehow. Like, it's kind of crazy town sometimes if you kind of look at that.
I mean, and we'll do color consults, like whatever we need to do to make it look the best that we can possibly get it within a reasonable budget.
Right. You guys kind of any other like recent objections or thoughts? Or I've also used recently, I told somebody out the gate, but good thing they were a multiple time client of mine, that I thought their house was going to hit 800, and they left for a week vacation to hand me the key and said, whatever, do what you need to do in here. So it was great, because I like people like that. They've already seen what we do and trust it. But I felt kind of guilty by the time a week and a half went by and we were going to list it. I had to have the conversation I know you're real enthused when I told you it was 800, but because the last couple weeks interest rates shot up about 0.5% and went to the highest ever, that when it was hitting that 7.38, 7.5, and we have seen a significant decrease in showings and offers. People kind of clenched up. I think we need to go to 775. I think we need to go one notch down. And they're like, great, we're fine. They were good about it. But I was worried to have that conversation. But I knew I needed to have that hard conversation rather than just put it out at 800 and work them down 2 weeks later, because I think that would have hurt them worse. And it took us 2 weekends, but we got 770. And they're pleased as punch still. So that was good. But, you know, just kind of think about those things that sometimes you have to have. And I've heard it said often, the agents who make the most money are the ones that have the hard conversations, right? We don't avoid them, dodge them. Although sometimes I'll have a whole sleepless night about the whole conversation in my head
And then
I
you're
have
like,
with
oh,
them.
that,
And like I said, and then I messaged her and I said, I know you're on your plane back and we're about to start your property. I feel really bad, but it really, since we talked last time, has changed a little bit, and I think it's in your best interest. She's like, no worries, go for it. But I was like,
then you lost like 8 hours of sleep.
yes, yes. So sometimes you just gotta rip the Band-Aid off, have the conversation, and again, if they know you're genuinely in it for them, and that the reason you're telling them this is because you've got some experience, you've got some data, you've got some numbers, you've got some reasoning, something just happened in the last 2 weeks that has changed the market, you've given them logic, I think they can flow with you.
Well, and I'm guessing you're kind of planting that seed at the initial appointment too, right? Like I've explained to people, we're in a really volatile, you know, housing market, right? While it seems like it's peaches and cream, we still have a lot of headwinds happening in real estate. So that's the one thing that I do try to kind of prepare people for. Like what we say today might not apply, you know, 2 months down the road, but understand that, you know, pricing is one of our most important elements. Like I take it very seriously, you know, when we're pricing a home. And I think people appreciate the honesty, but I also tell people, like, I'm not there to be your best friend. Like, I'm there to get your home sold and make sure that I'm telling you accurate information,
right,
or the best information that I can come up with, you know, looking at the market. So, because to Sharon's point, there's always going to be those people. I mean, I'm very precise in my listing appointments. I'm not a lot of fluff. There's always going to be those people that come in and will
just wow
say, like, oh, this is so wonderful, everything's great, and then they haven't sold the house in 4 months, right? So, you know, I always tell people, my goal is to get your home sold. It's not to shop for my listing sign in the ground. I don't, that's not how I practice real estate. So, so sometimes I will tell people, like, hey, I'm going to tell you something that's probably hard to hear, but it really is ultimately in your best interest.
Yeah.
But you're going to turn some people off with that approach too.
Absolutely.
Inevitably.
There's just some people, they can't help it. Somebody's very enthusiastic, seems very confident, and the few that we feel like we've lost because of that, you know, an agent of mine will come in like, oh my gosh, can you believe, like, I sold that house, they love me, and now they say so-and-so told them, you know, something 50,000 more and was so enthusiastic, and we'd look them up and they have barely sold houses. They might have been a good salesperson because they made them feel good, but at the end of the day, we watched it and it didn't sell. You know, even, I mean, I think they reduced it, didn't sell. So you hope that maybe sending them, and I've done this, I send them a nice, like, little handwritten note sometimes when I don't get it, or after I've kind of emailed and said, hey, I want to be the best, and clearly you chose someone else, and that's how we found out. They said, oh, they were just so confident this was it, and they told us this number, and we just had to go for it. Then maybe you send them a note that just says, if for any reason something isn't feeling right, isn't great, I always want the opportunity to work for you. Had a handful of them call me back. Say, this is not going well at all. It was a big mistake. Can you come and help us?
Yeah.
You know, but because I was a professional about it, and even if that one worked out, but it didn't work out well, I still might get the call back the next time or get referred to the sister or whatever. I'm just saying, like, so not ignore, if you don't get something, don't just ignore it. Do what you can as a follow-up and do what you can to always have the bridge open to come back, or the door open, as they say. You know, because that's just how it is.
One other thing I was going to say too, I always am planting the seed because we can't always predict what the market, you know, like I kind of joke with people, if I could predict what the real estate market would do, I wouldn't, while I appreciate being here today, I wouldn't be here.
All right.
I would be gallivanting through Europe. And, you know, sometimes, like, you know, putting that humor in,
Right.
you know, everyone kind of giggles about that or whatever. But, you know, I'm always planting that seed about price reductions, like, in that initial appointment, or at least in that pricing conversation, because you know, like I tell everyone, we're human, right? We're not perfect. So sometimes we do have to adjust based on what the market is telling us. But I like to have that conversation up front, so it's not like when I'm asking for a price reduction 2 weeks later, I've already planted that seed at that initial appointment that we may have to adjust. So I'm a huge fan of planting seeds, right? Because sometimes what you'll find is they'll be like, oh, should we go ahead and reduce the price? We haven't gotten any offers yet, right? And you're like, oh, well, as a matter of fact, I was going to reach out to you today, right? I mean, you know, because if you're good at planting those seeds, they're going to kind of come up with some of these ideas on their own, and then it's a less.
It's not really a surprise.
Yeah,
or what are you saying?
It's the path of least resistance, right? At that point.
And if you tell people, look, after a few days, if it's totally dead, we're probably going to have this conversation. But certainly after 2 weeks, even if we've had some decent action, but people aren't jumping over the fence, that's when we should talk about it before it gets all the way through a third weekend. And I thought, again, watching that white glove listing thing, it reminded me of another piece of the puzzle was when people say, well, wait a minute, we've had 3 or 4 people who've been pretty interested. They said maybes or yes, but still looking at a few more. And they haven't said in your follow-up, you know, because we're always getting follow-up and information. They haven't said like, no, we're not interested. You know, so why would we reduce the price? And that's what Brittany said, and I thought it was a great way. She said that's exactly when you reduce the price. She said, even if I'm only gonna go, you know, 10 grand or something, you know, like whatever makes some sense. And you guys, let's just be honest, like just charging $100 or $1,000, I think people all think, what the hell are they doing?
Yeah.
She said make small, but I don't think that's small. Like in certain price ranges, like even 5 doesn't like raise anybody's pulse, but 10, 20, 25s, you know, depending on the price scale, we'll start making some movement. And that you definitely, if you've just got over a few days, no one's saying I'm writing, they're still looking. That means they looked at yours, but they're still holding it as a backup plan. And they're most likely to just wait for something else, right? You're always just gonna be that backup plan until maybe you sell. Or if you make a move, someone might go, oh, we should go back and look at it again. Oh, we've looked for a few weeks, it was still the best, but it prompted them to feel like it's a little better deal. Because people make the decision on the front end based on the price of how good of a deal it is. Same reason that buyer said to me at my 155, when they saw a 1.6 that wasn't as nice, even though they can't buy the 155 anymore and it went for more, they were already corrupted that this isn't worth that. I'm like, yes, it is worth it. These are small potatoes things, but buyers can't see past it. So it's another big example, because I just went through it, to use with all of my clients. Can you understand? Just some scratch and dent on some trim paint and some pulls on some carpet with a cat, they were out, you know. And that's crazy when it is the floor plan you described. And I told them, I said, I couldn't have rubbed a lantern and made the one other in this entire neighborhood that was built 2 years newer and based off of ours that I just sold come up. But you said, I wish I could get that floor plan again. And I got it, and it's coming this weekend. I thought I was gonna be the hero. And instead, they wanted to pick it apart. I'm like, y'all, get real. You know, that one's gone. Go focus on today and focus forward. We won't see another one of these now. And it's gone. So those are, you know, hard things when you're like shaking them a little bit. Like, what are you doing? You know.
And at that price point, it's like a little carpet and paint. It's not.
No. I was like, 10 grand, I can get this house. My guy will come in and make it look just like that. She's like, nope, I know it costs more than that. Well, then it became, because now she wants to change paint colors. Her paint colors were fine. But she wouldn't have said all that if it was buttoned up.
Yeah.
Then it became, oh, I don't like the backsplash. I don't like this. I'm like, I know you just renovated $600,000 in a big house that she's done. She's gonna change some things anyway, but she got so steered on that because things she had to do versus things she didn't have to, but in her mind she would always do, were just different to her. Just different. They have plenty of money. They can do whatever they want.
I swear, I think sometimes we need psychology degrees to,
that's what I kept saying. Thank you for making us see it, because they almost didn't see it because they didn't like the pictures. I'm like, stop. Come on, it's the same house. Better lot even. What else can we talk
and
about?
I was gonna dovetail off of that price reduction, like the larger quantities, like that's also what I'm prepping my clients for. Like, hey, if we test this at 450 for, you know, we'll know pretty quickly within that first like 10, 14 days whether we hit it right, especially for unique homes. Like where I have absolutely no comps, but I'm like, just be prepared. My next, if we do it at 425, my next price suggestion is going to be 400, right? So that they're prepared for. I'm like, we're not doing like a $5,000 reduction, because I do think that goes back to the strategy, because like I have one client that their house is really like $650, but they want to list at $635, and I'm like, I mean, without saying, hey, that's a dumb idea, I was just kind of like, okay. I said, but you guys want to be net at $635. Just know that if we don't move in that first 10 to 14 days, because they're very sensitive and want to move it quickly, our next succession is going to be $625. And they're like, oh, okay. I mean, but that's
But
still
it
what
is-
they wanted to do. So I was like,
But it is easier to move somebody from 635 to 625 than it is from 650 to 625. So that's why if I'm really battling with someone on a line, I might let them go to that 5 to 10 if I really can't convince them, because it's then all the way to the next line. Because I used to say, well, as long as you're in the same bucket, everybody's going to see you. Just because I know in my head I'm prepping myself for a quick pull them back to that line. And there is something again with unique properties. Ben's got a very, very unique one recently. I mean, more unique than I've probably seen in many, many years. And trying to find a price when it has nothing to do with anything, and there's so few sales period anyway, but it has nothing to do with anything, let alone anything normal in the market ever. So then you're trying to find a price at where it's certainly nowhere near this, and maybe we can justify some of these smaller or definitely lower. Let's grab this price, but be realistic with the seller that I'm giving you a range after we do some work, what I think you will net. But at the end of the day, I use this line a lot because you hear it a lot, the market will speak. And we've got to listen. It means if we get some traffic and it's a lot of no's, then we know another price movement will, again, move to some different fish in a pond that we might get hit that aren't seeing it right now, because we got to get in their price bucket. And then also by their feedback. You know, there have been those clients that they would not change that green carpet or something dumb, you know, and once they got 2 or 3 of them in the feedback that week, like, would love the house, but dang, that green carpet was a turnoff. Somebody else saying it got them to listen. So then it might not be price. It might be I can pause it for a couple days and get something that's visually bad on the house changed. Because sometimes that's...
yeah, sometimes people...
I feel like condition is almost more important than price. Because if someone's interested, they might run some numbers and decide to make you a lower offer. Where if someone just isn't interested because they didn't feel it walking in, it doesn't ever matter what the price is, right? Unless it's, I tell people, unless it's like a foreclosure price, then it's enough of a deal that they want to absorb some issues.
So I'm curious, Min, with that unique property, did you give them a pretty large price range?
Well, it's unique also that the situation is a little unique as well, because it's an expired listing.
Mm-hmm.
So she had listed with somebody and left one price up in the MLS more than 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So now it kind of forced her in the corner a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So she had no choice but to kind of listen to our kind of expert's idea. So it was a little easier that way, but like I said, you know, we didn't have a strong pricing, you know, opinion
We
about
just
what
said
it is.
if it would go
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
and they were at $489, and we're like
No.
$450. We're like,
Yeah.
I don't even know someone's gonna pay $450, and that's after we fix some
Yeah.
like real bad visuals
And
going
like
on,
I
and
said,
some unfinished projects that were started. So if we can get all that going, then we'll see where the market will do. And I mean, it was willing to risk it, right? I told them I don't even know if you want this listing because it's so challenging. Sometimes it's just let's go find better fish to fry. But if they'll listen and do at least what we're saying, even though it's a lot to absorb, then they probably will play ball with us, and it's worth going down the path.
Yeah.
Because there are the unique buyers, because it is unrestricted, and you know you can go be a prepper out there, whatever you want to do.
I mean, that, and you know, I find on the unique homes, especially the ones that you can't find comps, I even told them, I was like, I'm sorry that I'm giving you this wider range, but I truly feel like we could be in this gamut.
Mhm.
So we might as well try it here, but then be prepared to reduce to here and then here.
Right.
Because if you have no comps, I mean, well, again, no, based on how the market is reading it, but those I find are more challenging, and I'm sure you're running into too right now, like when we're pricing homes, there's sometimes we're not finding any comps because nothing's sold in the last, 6 months, a year, or whatever,
Yes.
that's gotten really, I don't know if
Very
you found that challenging,
Very
but I
challenging.
appreciated, when McNamara was in here, him talking about that bracketing and things like that, because I've actually used that analogy a lot, because I'm sitting here going like, well, I have no sales in this subdivision for the past year, so I'm having to extrapolate information from, other areas to try to cobble together a semblance of a, market analysis. So that, for me, that's been really challenging, I think, this last 6 months.
And I think a seller does have to understand that a lot of value when it comes to straight, what we call paper value, to put a listing out there, has a lot to do with comps and appraising. So if we can find stuff and say that the predictable appraisal range is gonna be this, and most likely the buyers are going to need financing, that's another thing. When they feel they're just so special and somehow is worth 30 or 50 or whatever more than one that was probably pretty close, and they always want to, and that's what you have to kind of camaraderise with them on. Like, we understand that you feel your kitchen is better, or your lot is better, or your sealed crawl space, or whatever it is that they list these 3 or 4 things. But understand, when the listing agent went and talked to that seller, they had 3 or 4 things about their property that weren't those things that were very special, they felt, and were standout. Everybody has what they align with, and then there's the bigger picture for the sexy things, the kitchens, the baths, the colors, that really are the turn-ons, manicured lots and things like that, that people pay more money for, right? It's just true. The under the hood stuff, which my engineer types and even my kind of conservative older types really want to tell me about, is they've got the best HVAC. They've just had the roof done. They've sealed their crawl space. They had a radiant barrier put in their attic for insulation. They, a tankless water heater. Like, they list off like zillions of under the hood stuff. But I tell them, well, until they walk in and love it, they don't even look at that list, right? That's the list that bolsters what do I have to think about to repair or put some money behind. That might be negotiable points if there's not competition. But until they love it, they're not even gonna look at that stuff. And it's hard for them because they just put all this money in this stuff over the last 5 years or 10 years and just think they've done all these high quality things, and they're high quality people who dealt with high quality roofers and all that. And like, yes, there's that buyer who's gonna love all that, and the fact that you're all brick and they don't have to this or that. But at the end of the day, what really moves the meter in our market for most buyers, and we gotta go toward most buyers to put many butts in the seat as possible, is gonna be those finishes. And trying to pull those pictures and visually show them over and over again. There have been times where I've said, hey, I'll price your house as is, or next to nothing done, maybe just this one water stain on your ceiling or something, versus if we did my little cosmetic razzmatazz. And we'll talk about what investment versus return is and why I believe in this so much, and then you just decide what you want to do. I don't put myself through all the drama of quoting it, getting it done, and don't even pay us anything. I have somebody full-time managing this. I don't do it because I want to cause myself a lot of time and energy. I do it because I know what return my sellers get, and you'll send more, faster sold signs, more people call. That's my investment in you, and hopefully as a return back to me. But when I tell them that, and then I go through it, every comp looks like the high-end stuff. And none I can find have the brown trim and the dated this and the wallpaper. It's hard to then tell them this is the difference. I love it when I can find ones that are exactly case study of what I'm trying to show them, right? But so many people, and that's where I have to tell them, so many people have gotten the message. This gets you the most money. So much so I couldn't even find one who left theirs undone, right? But those are real interesting when you can find those to save them and hold on to them. And especially if you ever follow, there was one, Julie called back, listed this weekend in Wood Valley. It was an acre lot. It's a ranch, 4-bedroom with a bonus room over the garage, totally original-ish inside. There's a couple little things and a half bath that were done, like a new toilet and, fixture type thing probably over the years. But all the brown trim, all the original stuff everywhere. And she threw it on this weekend for $550. And there was one recently, a couple hundred square foot more, 2-story, that was $850, all done up. And also had a pool in the backyard as another big rider. But I bid $950 on it and didn't get it. We were number 2 of 13 offers.
On which one, the pool or
The
ranch?
850. We
Yes.
didn't bid on but my people were thinking, I should probably get this 550 and put 150 grand in it. I'll be really good. And they could see, the husband could see it. The wife was like, hell no, I ain't doing that.
Yeah.
Good luck with that, husband. I'm not doing it. But it'll be interesting case study if someone buys it and flips it to get a sense of
What is it?
did they do this and they put it on for $775 after putting 100 grand in it, and they just to show again what that brings in a market space. I love those things because then it helps continuing to like support what the value is in doing those things and getting the price and the condition and the features all added up. That makes a lot of sense. And the market will speak. And we've got to listen to it. And I think these types of analogies and using the buckets where things fall and telling people when there are no comps, what we've got to do is make our best analysis based on experience, but then flow with what is happening. And always, I think every once a week, no more than twice a week, every 2 weeks, you've got to be getting them back in front of the seller who has not sold before they're calling you. Be in front of them before they're pestering you. Otherwise, they think you're not doing anything. You're sitting around and waiting for it to sell. And what are you doing? Why my house isn't sold? Everybody else's is sold within 2 weeks in this neighborhood. Mine's been on a month. What are you doing? They always think when their house isn't sold, the agent's doing something wrong, right? So staying ahead of them. Hey, we know your house hasn't sold in 10 days. Let me show you what has sold or what the new listings look like or how we're lining up. Because I've had somebody on more than 2 weeks and I have not changed their price because I priced them so well on the front end and put it so well, and I've watched and nothing else in their competition, it's a luxury price point, has sold. So there was nothing for me to point to that says you need to reduce. They followed my let's be very conservative on the front end. But it is a little scary for them, for me, for everybody, when their little territory suddenly, since the interest rates popped up right when they listed, that things have not been moving as quickly. And 2 more houses have listed in their neighborhood since, have not been selling either. So then they start feeling like, oh, but we're leading the pack. So if one sells, we should check out first. If I felt like we 2 or 3 listed and we weren't leading the pack, then I'd be nervous about we need to make a change. So, anything else? Questions, fun, things you've experienced we can talk about? Ideas?
So many experiences.
So many good experiences.
I actually did have one recently where I had told them one price and we ended up upping it $25K because I didn't have any comps. And then all of a sudden in this 2-week time period had like a whole bunch of comps, and I actually reached back out to them and I said, I need to actually adjust the pricing I gave you 2 weeks ago to this. And they were like, really? And I'm like, well, it seems like it's trending that way. And they're like, okay, well that sounds good to us. And I mean, we ended up getting multiple offers even at the higher price. So
Is that rare? Is that rare?
that's rare. I mean, I normally don't see a shift like that. It just happened to be this random occurrence where there were no comps, and then all of a sudden, I had 4 or 5 closings in that 2-week time period in 2 weeks.
That's crazy.
That really helped and all of them had gone over list price. So all of a sudden it kind of pushed us to a different price bracket. But that's why I always tell people like, hey, we're going to price it now, but we are going to have to price it again before we go on the
So
market.
you didn't even see before that when you listed, is anything coming soon in that area?
Well,
anything like that?
There were active comps or pending,
Okay.
right? But I didn't have a lot of closed sales to go off of, and obviously I prefer that. So I was doing it based off of essentially active pricing and pending pricing, which I don't like doing.
Yeah.
And then just let them know, again, I clearly explained to them like, hey, we've got, a handful of ones closing for the next 2 weeks, which could impact the pricing. And it actually worked to their favor. So we actually had signed listing paperwork at the lower price.
Mhm.
And then, we just did a contract amendment before we went active. But that's rare. I mean, that doesn't happen super often.
And I still lead with what list price got those prices back when things would go wild. If something kept going, oh, this one went over 100, this one went over 100, I might only stair step them up
Like
25 or 50.
Yeah.
I would not go all the way to that 100 because you can't create that atmosphere that gets that juice of everybody competing by going to the line, even if you could have appraised
Yeah.
because the comps
And
just came
we
through.
still kind of stayed, you know,
Below the line,
below that line.
and that's where you got more.
But at a big
offers.
cutoff point.
Mhm.
So it was kind of like, okay, how do we move that needle, but not, you know, cut ourselves off either. So.
Yeah. And I think that's the hardest thing, and probably as a newer agent, and maybe even an experienced agent, because I think it's gotten harder and harder on me, and I think I'm really good with pricing, is finding comps, understanding them. And even on the buy, I mean, if you gotta know it on the list side, you gotta know on the buy side too, because your buyers, or at least I would think they're asking you, what are the comps, what's it gonna appraise for, what's it gonna sell for? You know, for you to have the intel as much as possible to advise them if you think there's gonna be gaps, but you think they're gonna have to go to a certain price to get it.
When I think what's, you know, good is, like you said, you can kind of pull that Wind Valley comp in that you know your clients put in X and still didn't win it. Like, those are all nice tidbits, like insider information, right?
Right.
As you're being able to present with clients too, because
Right.
it again cements you as that authority, you know, in the
Yeah.
market.
I mean, I feel bad to tell somebody we lost. We got second place, but I mean, the agent was nice enough because I've had a relationship with her. She said, you were tied for first and we would have went with you because of the relationship, and the last minute for the deadline, the other people went up a wad.
Yeah.
I mean, we're already up 100 grand, folks. And I knew my people, that was it.
their
Like, I already pushed them pretty hard to get to that based on what their search has been and what we've looked at. And I just knew it didn't matter if it was $10 more, they weren't gonna do it. So it didn't, you know, you just gotta know your client. Where if I knew my client would pay more, just needed to know, I would have probably been like, let me know if you need 10 more grand or 20 more grand. And she might have told me, cause I asked.
Yeah.
Right?
Always ask.
Always ask. And it was nice for her to tell me that I was 2 of 13. Cause that made them feel like, now they trusted me even more. They already trusted me because
Well, I think it's
before, but
validation,
even more
right?
that we needed to go that high. Where if we went that high and just got it, they might have thought, well, gosh, did we pay 50 over? You know, but at least they got it. That's another thing, you know.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting because that client forever for 2 years now, and they don't look very often. Master down, master down, master down. This house was a master up.
Interesting.
And it's because it had the lot, it had the location, it had the pool, and it had every kitchen, bathroom, nook, cranny. It was clearly like
That was a great
decorator,
house.
designer who owned the house. She had redone it over the 20, she'd owned it more than 20 years, at the right times and the right ways. It was just so well done. It was that feeling you got. You didn't think someone just slapped in something to sell it. It was great. It was like expensively, nicely
That
done.
was
That
amazing,
someone
'cause
enjoyed.
We had clients that offered on that too.
Oh yeah.
And I remember telling one of our agents, I'm like, that's not high enough, like, if they want to get it.
Yeah.
I was like, because you could tell even by photos. I didn't see it in person, but that it was impeccable. Yeah.
And there's once in a life. That's what I told them. Like, this is a once in a lifetime house. It doesn't meet your criteria, but it's under your budget, and based on what you've seen, it's even at this price, you should make the offer. And they just needed me to give them permission to do it. I said, I know it's not the master down you said. I'm not going to hold that against you.
Yeah.
Like, just go for it. So.
So if you're not giving an as-is price,
Mhm.
and then you're coming back and you're giving them a range based off of what improvements they are gonna do, and then how are you
Yes.
walking through that?
So a lot of times I just take the list price, like when this one we said 450, because I'm already chunking her down so much more where she was and telling her to do work. That one I just said, let's just say we got 450. Then I'm gonna take out this range of work, because I haven't quoted the work yet, I'm just ballparking. I think you're gonna be in this range for the work. Then we've got commissions, expenses, and this is what you would net. And I put that in an email, so at least they can focus on what that net number is. Others, when I'm just pricing it for the first time and I'm saying it could be 525 to 550 or something, then I make that range. And again, a range if I'm thinking they need work and what I think that work number will yield. Yeah, so I'm just trying to always give them some insight. And sometimes I do say, because it might negotiate or we may price it a little lower when we actually price it, I'll give you a range. I think people can handle that. But but occasionally I just stick to a price because I feel very confident in the price. Or like this, I'm like, I'm already telling her something she's gonna have a real hard time
Yeah.
with, and I have no idea what the numbers are. So let's just start. Well, let's pretend it's this, and at least we go for that. You know where you'd stand if it works out. I figure most people know how to subtract 10 or 20 grand or whatever if it goes lower, right? So, and that's it. And she's an interesting character, this lady, because then she said, "Okay, I've got this other house," and I'm thinking, yes. It's more conforming. It's just a vinyl box house in Southeast Raleigh with a 1-car garage. Certainly, this is going to be straightforward. No, she bought it 2 years ago and paid. It was listed for $350. She paid $385. I don't even know if she was competing with anybody back then, because it doesn't look like it's that special for what it is. I looked up the comps for 2022, and nobody had paid. Like, there was maybe one comp that would have supported that happened within 12-month period, but nobody had bid that much over on others to say that should have been the pattern. I think she kind of got hoodooed, or maybe she got so excited to have it because she knew she could Airbnb it. And so that's kind of what she's been doing. I don't even know what those numbers are or what it looks like. But we're having to go in and say, look, like $385. Like, even if you look at the Redfins, the Realtor.com and stuff like that, they're at like $325, $330. And then for whatever crazy reason, I think it's because she had it listed and didn't sell for $399. I think that Zillow has picked up like $380 or something on it. Still lower than what she paid, but close. And I mean, there's nothing. Like, I found 2 I could point to that would justify $350. And if she really glossed it up, I might be able to put it at $360 and hope that she hope that we impress somebody enough to get it. I mean, it's got some worn out carpet and vinyl downstairs, like no hard floors, like nothing, but she threw in some what I call gravel look granite is about the only thing she's upgraded or done in that house. So it needs paint, it needs flooring. So I'm doing that. I'm like, okay, so let's pretend it's around where it was listed before. And I think you can say that too. In 2 years, our market may have went up some and down some, but 2022 summer was pretty peak, you know. In different market times, winter times a little lower, summer times a little higher, but it hasn't gone really up. And $350 is what it was listed at when you bought it. You were willing to bid more, but $350 was probably the right list price. And I think today, the right list price fixed up is $350. So by the time I'm washing it out, you know, expenses to fix it up, commissions and everything, I mean, she might get $310 to $320 and she paid $385, and she might just keep Airbnb or whatever. But my also note to her, because she's like, you know, I could just hang on to it, is I don't think, given what's going on around in her zip code and what the competition looks like, that it's going up. It's probably, if anything, because of age, going down. And she might need to just seize the moment today and take the loss. Because she is proud when she's overpaid for something, because she just liked it, she basically told us. You know,
And
like
it's a hard location.
Oh, really hard.
So Sharon, let me ask you this. This is cycle. So if you, because in this case, I personally think that the previous listing agent kind of screwed her, the two house, screw her over for the listing price. So if you have gone to a listing appointment like that, and the homeowner is just so fixated on the price they want to list, and you just know for sure that you would disappoint them greatly, because they're not gonna change, and you can't do anything for them to change, and you're just gonna list it for 3, 4, 5 months, and it's just gonna expire and everything like that. Would you even take that listing?
No, it costs too much. I mean, you have to understand, like,
No,
what,
even just list it as is, like you.
but
don't have
it
to
still
do it.
costs too much.
Okay,
But
like
it's
your
still
reputation.
money, hard ass money.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you understand, like, we're paying, whether I gotta do it myself or labor, people to put it in. We still tend to send our stager over to do stuff. That's a few $100s. We still pay for measurements to protect our license. That's at least another $100. We pay for a sign. That's $75. Like, it's if we do it right, we've spent a couple, when we do the actual fixings too, we've spent at least a couple $1,000s to hope a house sells and we get a return. So we are not going into the business of just throwing signs up and hoping something happens. It used to be, There's other agents in the market that would just say, just take any listing anytime, because you get calls off the signs and at least get more opportunity. You could work them possibly down, get them real, whatever. That was the thing. Name of the game, just get the sign in the ground. But you have to understand, with Zillow, Realtor.com, now Homes.com, whatever, the game has changed. People don't call off our signs, hardly ever. They click buttons that we have to pay huge percentages back to, or upfront fees to even get those clicks. So heck no, you know, I'm not paying all that money just to be frustrated also with the client
And
being
it's gonna be
frustrated
a
with
huge
me.
time suck.
Yeah.
Like you're not even batting me in time.
No,
right?
because
You're
for
just,
me,
like,
it keeps
hard.
me up at night too, worrying that that
Yeah.
client thinks I'm doing something wrong,
Mhm.
right? Or what conversations to have with them to keep convincing them to do it right, right? I don't let things expire on my watch. I just don't. So I'm not going to go into it. Now, we've gone into it and let people overprice, but with the reality that we knew that we could get them where we needed them to be, not grossly crazy,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
We could get them, they were motivated enough, they're hard-headed, they got to try it the way they got to try it, and then we get them to, let's get real and let's get it, you know, to where it really moves, right?
Okay, so we gotta set expectation up front. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, we gotta go for 2 weeks. If it doesn't go your way, let's revisit what we discussed, kind of a thing.
Yeah. And I haven't done this in a long, long time, but we had, Nicole's not here, she had a real hard-headed seller who was pricing too high. And he liked all my write-ups because he's an engineering type person. Some people really like all the detail. Others, I've had ones that go, thank you for sending that. And we're at the new construction place, sign up for the new place. I didn't read it, but you could tell, like, they want to know what their house was worth. So I put all this diagrams and information and comps and discussion of what it was worth. Because she thought I was probably a little low. But just because I did the homework, she's like, I didn't read it, but I trust you. Like, you know, she knew I didn't just make up a number.
Yeah.
Even if she didn't digest it or care to look at it, she's not that type of person maybe.
Yeah.
But when she asked me for the goods, I gave her the goods, right? So now we're moving forward. So that's just something to know too. That's why I always put the homework in to show people. And then later they can't go, oh, you didn't tell me, or oh, I didn't understand that.
Interesting. Okay.
Hell, we just had one that said, oh, I thought it was 5%. And it's signed at 5.5. He asked me, could I do his net again? He got full price. So the first time I did his net was on that price. So all I did was pull up that email, re-forward it, and said everything below is basically the same. And guess what it said in there? 5.5% commission. Da, da, da. I said, you know, and he didn't argue, but it was just interesting. Like, it was said, it was in the signed document, and now it's even in an email. That because he asked me to find where I gave him the net, or give him his net again, I'm gonna pull up the old email, I need to do all this math again. And I'm like, it says right there even. It wasn't even just hidden like, here's a number, and I didn't say it. It's like line by line. So just documenting things that you say, or what you're going to say, or like with your lady, we're documenting it, and then you're having a conversation to explain it to her. Because these are huge changes that she's got to, or losses she's got to digest. And trust that we got her best interest at heart. We're not just pricing her low to get rid of it. A lot of people like to think that about realtors. Oh, you're just gonna make it look pretty and price it low and sell it fast. That's how you make all your money. No, that is not.
Your goal is to sell it though, right?
Right.
From the beginning.
No, but they think you're doing it to make it go fast, right? Oh, I can take my time. Well, the market doesn't work that way. You just call me when you're really ready. Because if we're just gonna take our time, it's gonna screw you on your price. Right?
So that's why you said that most of us just call and say, yeah, can you run this for me? Can you try this? Like, no. You can sign the paper and then
Right.
we'll talk. Right.
Right. She's like, can you send all the contractors out there and give us the quotes? I'm like, no, I gave you a range. It's a solid range. You can call me to the mat if I give you something way out of range, but it's gonna be in that range and we're gonna make this work. But we're not gonna invest this person and that person and run. Our contractors would kill us if we ran them out to everybody who wanted to quote. They Google quotes for free because it's locked in and they're going to do some work most every time. Too much? Enough? Good? Thoughts? Helpful?
It's very helpful.
Okay. I never know. You guys understand, like, when I've done it so long, I think I'm just talking about everyday stuff here. And I try my best to think of ways to explain it or say it, but I need that feedback, like, oh, that was really good, or oh, don't talk about that, that was boring, things like that, then I know that it's worthwhile.
Mhm.
Because I just don't know. I'm trying to be like informative and helpful, and us go down these little tunnels and paths of how real estate works. I think it's a lot of people from corporate America. They come in. I've had several over the years that even good salespeople. They're like, I can't just go through a training and be an expert and like know what I'm doing. No, like it is an infinite world of different product and different inspections and different sellers and different, like, it's not just I've got this product and I've got to convince you it's the best one of that product and you're going to buy it from me, right? It's such a world of psychology and just all kinds of nuances that come through that make it very challenging.
And I think a lot of cocky salesmen get think that. I was like, you know what? If I'm the best salesman in this industry, I can go into your industries and kill it.
Mhm.
That was like kind of a thing. I was like,
It's
well,
a whole different type of sales.
yeah, it take a few years of learning the rope, and you know,
And you're always, I mean, I learn something new probably every week or every month.
Yeah.
You know, something new comes along, or I listen to a new webinar and I learn a new way of saying something or presenting something. I'm like, oh, that's good. Just makes it clear. There's no arguing. Like, you can't probably do it any other way, and the seller or the buyer is convinced that's the path.
already.
Okay?
Thank you. All right.
Yep. Is it exhausting or what?
No.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sharon.